Okay, so for this last section, we're going to be talking about prediction in general and how it works on graphs. So we've already covered prediction in the last stage, graph level prediction specifically. But here we're going to kind of get into the details of different variants for prediction. And then we're also going to talk about generation process, which means how to construct a graph based on a subset of data or a very few input examples per se. And for this generation process, particularly graph generation, the literature out there is very scarce. But so the motivation that we're using here, or the framework, is actually based on two papers primarily. One is MOLGAN. So this is short form for molecular generative adversarial networks. And the second paper is GCPN, which is short for Graph Convolutional Policy Networks. And they both have some overlapping similarities, and they differ in a very in just like how they in sort of the generation process. But we'll talk about these similarities and differences hopefully in the generation phase. So there are generally speaking three types of prediction tasks. One is sort of based on a complete graph, a full graph, predict or classify a complete graph, which we already extensively talked about during the last phase. So just a recap example is, okay, based on a chemistry, is this toxic or not toxic? That's an example of a graph level prediction, which is the case that we're going to be covering here for the chemical analysis sort of use case. Now there's also edge prediction. And edge prediction, there are different variants of it. But generally speaking, edge prediction says, okay, based on a graph that I'm giving you, or a set of nodes, it could be nodes and edges. I want you to predict where the next edge is going to be. So what two nodes is the next edge going to connect? So that's sort of edge level prediction, or we can also call it it can also be by type. So you can also say, okay, I don't only want the relation between which nodes, but I also want the relational type. So maybe we're talking that a graph can have I don't know, different types of relationships, like let's say a node and another node is connected by. So in the case of chemistry, let's look for that chemical. Here, notice how a node and another node can be connected by its aromaticity. So aromaticity is electrical, the electron bond. It can be a one bond or a two bond. So that would be our relational type. In this case, we can have up to 3 or 4 types of relationships. Yeah, I think we're going to cover the types of relationships during, or we've already covered them during the demo. So yeah. Okay. And node prediction. Node prediction is similar to edge prediction, except in this case, let's say that we have many. We just want to let's say that we have a subgraph. We want to predict the next node based on on an existing graph. So a quick example here in chemistry, just to give some intuition. Let's say that we did not have this node right here. So we would say, okay, based on this graph that I'm giving you, where does your model think that we should predict a node, or where are we missing a node? So maybe the model says, oh, hey, we're missing a node here, and it would sort of complete this this cycle. That would be prediction. Node prediction. And I don't think we'll cover community sort of prediction, but this is a different sort of problem that we're not covering here. But maybe just for completeness, community is going to be community detection is usually sort of a clustering approach on graphs, where we just want to determine sort of what neighborhood based on different attributes or on the graph structure and attributes. Maybe what neighborhood we want to partition a graph in different communities. It can be, I don't know, in let's say we want to draw a community here, another one, let's say here, that would be a second community, maybe a third community here, based on how connected those components are. So that's sort of the community detection problem. And the algorithms there we're not going to cover for this particular use case. But yeah, it's an interesting problem as well. Okay, so node classification, I think we already covered it. What it means. So in this case, we have a set of papers that of nodes that represent papers in this case, and we want to predict one of the attributes of the paper. So maybe we give a new paper to the model, or we feed an inference paper, and we want to predict, okay, what is this talking about? So yeah, I can see this being a little more complex in this picture, but yeah, just to showcase, okay, we want to predict what subject this belongs to, and this is a sort of a on top of a relational graph, directed graph. Okay, so here there's a similar sort of link level prediction. I think this image might not be or it could be accurate, but so ideally here we would want to predict what relation type what relation type between two nodes. Yeah, the relation type. So let's say that we have here a node that is so here we have, for example, we have people, we have locations, maybe institution affiliations, another person. Let's say that we have born in. Okay, so here I see that this could be a two-way prediction, which is actually the one we're going to be covering during our generation. It's going to be sort of predicting a node and also a label. But here, sorry, a relation type sort of label. But here, let's say that the prediction for the node is, in this case, it's first going to be a prediction task. Okay, generate a node, and then also generate a. In this case, let's just make. Let's just go for sake of this example. Let's just say that we don't know what this relation type is. So in this case, we would predict both a location and a relation type. So born in. Okay. Okay, so we've already covered complete graph prediction. Let's say that we have a graph, and we want to predict if this is a homo-lumo gap, if this has a homo-lumo gap or not. And yeah, that's pretty much a binary classification, and we covered this during the training scenario. So yeah, we would have essentially a trained model. We would pre-process this chemical. We would feed it forwardly to our trained model and generate a prediction, binary prediction. Yes, it's a homo-lumo gap or no, or it has a homo-lumo gap or no. Another binary prediction here is Remember GCN, convolutional network? So here we would have an initial graph. In this case, it's a 3 hidden layer, or k equals 3 hops. I'm not sure if they pre-trained it or not for this example, but the main idea, this is a complete graph prediction. So we might feed the chemical into our model, and then just predict if this is, let's say, like toxic or non-toxic. Is this toxic or non-toxic, so to speak? Okay, so now we've covered prediction, sort of like the basic prediction tasks in a graph, right? Just to kind of give the core knowledge for the generation tasks. So now let's get into generation. So what is generation? Let's see if I have a better image. Okay. Generation is the process of, let's say, it's going to be a similar process to training, which we already covered, except instead of having, or we're going to be covering two literature examples right now. The first one is Mulligan, which is this architecture right here, or maybe this is Mulligan, and the other one is GCPN, which we did not document here because we chose to implement for the demo Mulligan. But yeah, what they both have in common is that they both GCPN and Mulligan use 3 neural networks. So they use sort of like a generator. So we can think of a generator as a predictor. A generator is just a standard sort of neural network model. So think of a generator as one of these models that's already been pre-trained and whatnot. That's going to be a generator. And then we're going to have a discriminator. So a discriminator is going to be, okay, at the end, and let me go back to this example. At the end of our, so this is actually the GAN framework proposed by Ian Goodfellow back in 2014, which was pretty, I don't know, it had a lot of acceptance throughout the machine learning community because, yeah, it's a pretty cool idea based on game theory. But the core idea is, okay, so we have one model, which is going to be a generator model. And this model is going to be in charge of, okay, I'm going to give you a set of inputs, and I want you to predict, okay, what do you think is, so this is actually an edge level prediction, not a complete graph. So we're going to train an edge level predictor or a model that's going to try to determine, okay, based on a subset on a subgraph, maybe I'll give you like 3 for the subgraph, I'll give you like these 3 maybe this node and these edges, right? Just a very small component of the graph. I want you to predict what the next edges will be. So this is an edge prediction sort of problem, or an edge prediction training model. And yeah, so that's going to be like the generator portion. So yeah, I'm going to give you this subset, and I want you to predict both the next node that you think we're going to have, and also the relation type. Of course, we don't just want the and this is where the GCPN and Mulligan differ on. So this is I think the only difference they have. Mulligan says, okay, I want you to give me this complete sort of graph, and just give me the I'm going to predict the whole sort of graph in just one sort of forward pass, and one sort of in one prediction phase. So you're going to give me these 3 nodes, and I'm going to predict the whole graph and in one as a result of as a graph prediction or just like the whole graph. So maybe it's simpler to view it something like this. Notice we have our adjacency matrix, right? So what would happen if we hide some of these ones just to represent a subset of the adjacency matrix? Let's say that we want a subset of the graph. We're just going to take both of these. So we would take both of these nodes, and we would hide the rest, right? And then as a result of our training process, we would ideally learn, or our model would learn, okay, if you give me these two nodes, I'm going to just go ahead and generate all these, the whole sort of adjacency matrix in one prediction shot, so to speak. So that's sort of the learning. It's trying to generate the whole graph as a complete in just one shot. Whereas the GCPN approach tries to generate one by one. So it's first gonna, let's say it starts with these two nodes. Instead of trying to generate the whole sort of adjacency matrix in one prediction shot, and just remember that this is gonna also sort of guide how you train the model in general. But anyhow, so sorry, just again, quick recap of Mulligan. Mulligan, we would give it two nodes, maybe a subgraph, and then if we feed it into our already trained graph, it would sort of predict, okay, you have to paint these ones right here. Leave the rest as 0, and that's your graph. And then it would, that's the first neural network. Now, the difference here with GCPN is that GCPN does it one by one. So it's going to go ahead and, let's say we start here. It's going to say, okay, what's the next one? The next prediction, instead of drawing all the adjacency matrix in one sort of shot, it's just going to only draw one single one in the adjacency matrix, so to speak. Just recall that if there are different relation types, we would have, let's say, for 4 different relation types, we would have 4 different adjacency matrices. So yeah, it would try to determine, okay, the next node. What do you think a good next node is, and what the connection between that those would look like. So that would be like one sort of loop. The next loop, it would go ahead and do the whole thing again. It would take this these 3 nodes as a subgraph input, and then it'll try to generate the output. So it's a slower process, but the problem here is there's no point of comparison between both approaches, because they were sort of published within a similar within a similar time frame. So maybe the idea was sort of lingering around, and both authors independently probably proposed a similar idea. But yeah, I think it'd be for our use case, we really have not completed the GCPN, but yeah, we're interested in sort of benchmarking both approaches and kind of analyzing them to see, just for our own sakes, for this particular use case, actually. Okay. So anyhow, those I think are the only differences between Mulligan and GCPN. GCPN is going to generate sort of one by one, and it's going to stop once there are no more sort of viable graphs. And yeah, and Mulligan does it all in one sort of shot. So we chose Mulligan just because it's sort of simpler to generate just one shot, and computationally speaking, I guess we don't have to sort of do one by one, but again, we'd probably need to benchmark both approaches, and I think that both approaches are going to be pretty good. So we've only tested Mulligan, but I'm expecting that the other one is going to be good as well. Okay, so that's going to be sort of the generator portion. How do we generate the graphs? Then there's going to be a discriminator portion. So this I think it's already. I hope this provided intuition into how to generate the graph and how Mulligan differs from GCPN. Now we want to talk about the discriminator. The discriminator. Recall we talked about a loss function sort of in our training stage when we were talking about how training works. So the discriminator in this case is going to be a very similar concept in a sense where we, as input during the training phase, we're going to hide the true graph. We're going to hide it, and we're going to provide sort of a masked or just a subset of the graph to the generator. And the generator is going to go ahead and do its thing. It's going to generate a graph, a full graph, and then it's going to just stop whenever it thinks the graph looks good for the model. But then the discriminator is going to be acting sort of like a loss function, where but a discriminator in this case is not going to be like a cross entropy loss, so to speak. It's going to be another neural network. But the idea is the same. Once this graph is completed, we're going to we're going to compare the real graph, which we've sort of just hidden. We know historically we have all the data, all the true graphs. We just fed in a subset of the graph. This guy generated the graph, and here we're going to compare with a real graph. So we're going to say, okay, how far away are you from the real graph? Maybe, hey generator, how good are you at generating graphs? So this discriminator is going to sort of it's going to generate a score, so to speak. I wanted to use another word, but it's going to this discriminator is going to provide a score based on how well this graph was generated. And based on that, the generator is going to adjust its model just in a standard sort of as we talked about during the training phase. It's going to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to loop here. I'm going to run through different epochs and try to generate better graphs every time. Of course, there's going to be a score. And yeah, so that's the idea of the discriminator. It's sort of to kind of compare, okay, how good is the graph you generated with the real sort of graph that I sort of hid behind you. So that's what this discriminator network is going to do. And there's also going to be a third sort of component here, a third network. And this third network is going to help the generation process. It's going to sort of guide the generation process to converge or generate models that are optimized for certain properties. So let's say that, and I think both literature uses the discriminator and the reward in a similar fashion. This discriminator to sort of analyze how well the graphs are chemically, if a graph is structurally chemically valid or not, and generate that or have a score about that. And the reward network, this is going to be sort of like it's going to help guide the generation process. So it's going to also have a set of scores, a score function that's going to say, okay, I'm going to analyze the generated graph based on and actually on the properties that we want our chemical to have. Okay, so this is very, very important right here for drug discovery. So the reward, again, it's going to optimize this graph. So it's also going to have like another score. Once we've already fully generated the graph, we're going to pass it through two sort of scoring functions. One is going to analyze the rules of chemistry, their validity, and the other one is going to analyze the properties of this chemical. So, as an example, we might have some external software that analyzes, okay, this chemical, how bioactive is it? Or actually, let's go ahead and look at, okay, what properties do we want to optimize for? And we covered that during the first the scientific discovery phase. So in this case, some of the properties that we may want to optimize our chemicals to have might be like biological activity, maybe a low toxic profile or high security profile, or the pharmacokinetic properties. So these are the properties that we want to have. And we also, maybe like for some advanced use case, we could also take some ideas from these other approaches. And like, for example, from peptidomimetics to, but those are that's sort of like the score that the reward function is gonna calculate. Now it can be based on like another trained model based on your own sort of trained model. Maybe you had a data set that where you already have had some chemical existing chemical data set and the label. Maybe you had a label that for toxicity level or bioactivity level, etc. All the properties that we already mentioned. So you can train your own, so to speak, or you can use some existing models to analyze this reward or optimize this property. So how is this going to work here in the graph network and the generation phase? So once we generate this prediction or this graph, we already talked about the score, and this score is going to be the same. It's going to say, okay, I'm analyzing your graph, and I think that you have a way too toxic chemical. So that's very bad. That's undesirable. So the score is going to be negative. And these, so we would actually optimize. So our sort of loss, so to speak, or our discrepancy between what we want our predictor or our generation model to generate is going to be worse. If so, like bad boy, you generated a toxic molecule. I want something less toxic. So we're going to propagate that and we're going to let our generator neural network know via the parameters. We're going to backpropagate these scores, both of these scores, and iteratively sort of learn a better model that's going to optimize for properties and optimize for chemical structure validity. And yeah, that's pretty much graph generation for chemical compounds. So this is another picture of Mulligan, and as we talked about, they're gonna here we generate like the whole 2D matrix. We would paint ones in certain areas, all at once. And yeah, and we already talked about the discriminator network, which is how well. So in this case, this looks pretty similar. So this is like the predicted graph and the real graph. And let's say that we gave a subset. Let's say that we gave it both of these elements and relationships. We fed this to our generator. The generator generated this graph right here. So then we analyze it with two lenses. We analyze it from the chemical validity lens, and it says, yeah, this actually looks pretty good. The structure, I like it. This is a good score. And then the next lens would be the property, whatever properties we want to optimize for. And then this guy might say, this is actually pretty toxic. We don't want that. So it's going to assign a lower sort of like a low score. Yeah. And yeah, we'd propagate these backward again during our training phase and hopefully generate a good model at the end.